Alright, guys. So, as that spectacular display of guitar virtuosity has clearly indicated, I feel pretty comfortable with identifying as a music nerd, a Gen X music nerd to be more specific. The Gen X part, I was just kind of born into. There's nothing really I can do about that, but I'm pretty okay with that. Um, but the music nerd part, it's kind of multifaceted in a way. You might put it that way, or I might put it that way. See, I'm not really an expert in any real single area of music. Like music nerd typically is a guy that can, list off, all the songs of an album in order and tell you who wrote them and, what year it came out and what label it was on and how many, reprints there were of the record and, all that kind of stuff. Or maybe, knowing everything about music theory and, all of the composers, the early, classical composers, and knowing their, lifespans and what, the years that they composed certain pieces and all of this kind of thing. I don't really know a whole bunch of that stuff. I've pretty much always just kind of relied on my ear. I don't know the names of all the songs on the albums, but usually, if I hear it, first few seconds or so, or at least once it gets to the chorus, can usually tell if I've heard it before, and maybe tell you who it is. But again, like I said, I can't really tell you what typically what album it came from, or and all that kind of stuff. But I know what I know, and I know a little bit about some albums and some artists, and I can't tell you who played on all of the hits throughout the years, and all of these legendary session guys and all this, and who played what, and what other recordings they were involved with, and but I know a little bit about instruments. For instance, I know a little bit about music theory. I know a little bit about recorded music. What else? I don't know. I know a little bit about playing the instruments. I can play drums all right, and don't know a whole lot about the brands and all this stuff. I know a little bit about the history, drums and how they kind of came up, and all the technological advances in the industrial age that kind of transformed the art form of playing drum set, and that kind of thing. Bass drum pedals and low boys and hi-hats and all this, But I can't really tell you all, what years certain, colors were available, or the wraps, what designs of wraps were available during what eras and all this. I just know what I know, keep it pretty simple. Stick with what I know, that kind of thing. And then guitar, yeah, especially these days, there's a lot of rust on my guitar playing hands. But I know a little bit about guitars, and it's how it's kind of come up and stuff. Again, I can't tell you, what year, a certain little design feature changed and this kind of thing. But overall, I think when it comes to guitar and how they work, and what pieces and parts are make them up. Dealing with mostly Fender, maybe a little bit of Gibson, but and all the derivatives of those. How people say that they haven't even scratched the surface of a topic. I think I can say with guitar, I have scratched the surface. Yeah, but that's about it. Yeah, I basically scratched the surface. I don't even know if I've, gotten through the clear coat, to the color. I don't even know if I've scratched it that hard, but I have scratched the surface. Other things, I can say, like tube amps. Man, I haven't even scratched the surface on tube amps. In fact, the surface is probably, in on the other side of the room. Maybe even maybe it's even in the next room. The surface that I need yet to scratch. Maybe it's in the house next door. Yeah, that surface has not been scratched, and it's kind of far away. That's what I'm saying. You hear me? Yeah, in fact, it might be down the street. The house down the street. Might be in the next town over, actually. Yeah. So, yeah, I haven't even scratched the surface on tube amps. But yeah, I know a little bit about the art of recording, the skill of recording, the science of recording. No, just, I've scratched half of the surface on that, maybe, if I'm lucky, see. But anyway, you put all these little, surfaces that may or may not have been scratched together, and I feel comfortable identifying as a Gen X music nerd. There was a time when the term nerd wasn't nearly as, I don't know if you can say it's cool, but it's acceptable. It can't even be a compliment, because nerd, I think, implies, and geek as well, right? You can be a music nerd, you can be a guitar geek, you can be a Star Trek nerd, right? You can be a Star Wars geek, that kind of thing. Yeah, it's a little weird, right? But it's also, it just insinuates that you're kind of into the details, right? The facts, the knowledge, right? You can be a space nerd, right? You can be a math nerd, right? You can be a science geek, right? So yeah, that just so it's not that much of an insult. It used to be an insult, right? Remember, like being a nerd, right? But there's one that I sort of lump in with these other words, but it has a totally different meaning, right? It takes the geekiness or the nerdiness part without the knowledge. Okay? Anybody remember being a dork? Yeah. You don't hear that one as much these days. Don't be a dork, man. So, I think that's the one that lives outside of nerd or geek, right? You're just a plain dork, right? You got none of the positive attributes of a nerd or a geek. You're just a dork. there are a lot of little things that people say a lot in everyday conversation. Like you know, it goes way back, and I use it as kind of just saying, you know what I'm saying, right? You know what I'm talking about. It's sort of assuming that the person you're talking to already knows what you're about to say, but you're saying it anyway, just for clarity. But you say, just as kind of saying, I know you already know this. I'm not doubting your intelligence by saying this. I'm just saying it because it's part of the conversation. But yeah, you already know, right? You know what I'm talking about, right? Or possibly in the question form, right? If you say something like you catch my drift, right? Or you picking up what I'm putting down, right? It's kind of like that too, okay? But that goes way back. My mom was a big user. She said more than I do, okay? And so probably where I picked that up from, you know. And yeah, I used to hear her talking to her friends, right? Whenever somebody visited or something, and there's a lot of going on, gotta tell you. And then there's like, right? And like, sort of, and kinda, and sorta, yeah. Either apologetically or triumphantly, I can declare that happened during Gen X. That was a Gen X phenomenon. Started with the whole Valley Girl thing, and it just spread. It spread like wildflower, wildfire. Yeah, it kind of spread like wildflowers, but more like wildfire. It spread across the whole country and then around the world. Kinda and sorta. I'm not sure where I picked those up from and when those sort of came to be, but yeah, I just thought that was something that was kind of interesting, and I just wanted for Gen X to be able to take credit for for better or for worse. Yeah, that was a Gen X thing, for sure. So yeah, this thing has really gone long enough, guys. It's about it for today. I hope you enjoyed it, and have a nice day.